3, 2, 1. Boom, there you go. That's how you do it. Hi, I'm Zen and welcome to this video on how to center a web page. It is the second installment of the Into the Wild Easy Build series. Now, the technique I'm going to show you is best for sites using a combination of absolute and relative positioning techniques. You could also apply it to grid-based systems, but I don't know why you would, since it's easier to do this in a grid anyway. And there will be a video on that soon-ish. So let's get into it. Although you saw me center a completed web page in the intro, which I will still do, we're actually going to be doing this first on the site's base page that we built in the previous episode, since that is the best time to do it, so we can set it and forget it. Now, if you didn't see my previous videos, well, how very dare you? But don't worry, I have your back. The link in the series should be popping up on the top right hand corner about now. As usual, I'm going to explain why we're going to do this. If you want to go straight to the action, then please go straight to the time being shown on your screen about now, or click in the chapters in the description. So the reason why is really simple. Websites today are rarely made to fit the entire screen state of a browser. In fact, for most sites, the majority of traffic comes from mobile devices, but that's another story. Though it is still part of this one. You see, even though the majority of people's PC monitors and laptops are in 1080p in resolution, that is 1920 pixels across the screen and 180 lines down, but again, not everybody's is. Some have bigger screens like 1440p, 4K like mine, and 5K and even larger. And others have smaller resolutions such as 720p or even standard definition. And even if they do have 1080p screen, who's to say that they'll have to browser at full screen? So designing a web page for a smaller than 1080p resolution can make it much easier to then make the changes for it to fit smaller size screens, such as tablets and mobile phones, as there are less columns to rearrange. In fact, there is a large percentage of designers out there who will actually design and build from the mobile device up to desktop and not the other way around. Anyway, when we have a website that is smaller than the screen estate, by default it is left aligned and it just looks janky. Here, let's have a look. So this is the home page again, and as you can see, it isn't centered and it just doesn't look nice. The space on the right here makes the site look wrong, and the indentations into these cards just look off, whereas when it is centered like this, the page looks a lot more balanced. There's equal spacing on the side. May not make the site look more exciting or enticing, but it does draw focus to the actual content. And overall, it's a more desirable looking site than the one when it is left aligned. So how do we do this? Well, let's go and find out. Here we have the base page that we made in our previous video in the series. If you don't have these files, then don't worry, there's a link in the description to download a folder with all the files in them, as well as a base.html page in case you don't want to work with PHP files. And all will work just the same. See bro, I got your back. So back to the code. The trick is fairly simple. We need to put a div around the entire contents of the web page, which is this whole area here. So the div is put just after the opening body tag element, and it closes just before the closing body tag element, just like I've done here. Notice I've given it a class of wrapper because that is essentially what it is doing. It is wrapping itself around the entire website. Like I said before, even though I'm doing this on a PHP page, this will work exactly the same on a HTML page. It's just the same. So now we've added the HTML, it's time to move in to the CSS where the magic actually happens. So we need to create a rule for our wrapper, and the best place to put it is between the body and the nav, because it's a very good idea to put things in order of the HTML. For this trick to work, we need to have a width assigned to the wrapper. A max width value will also work. So what value should we be using? Well, according to our design in Figma, we can see that the maximum width of our page is at 1500 pixels, which of course equates to 150 rem at a 10 pixel base. So back into our CSS, that's what we shall give it, a max width of 150 rem. The next thing that we need to do is to change its positioning type to relative. This will allow the div to actually move. And now we come to the cool bit. We use the margin to auto center align the page. I find it best to use a two-value system here, where the first value represents the top and bottom margin, and the second value represents the left and right margin. As you can see, we use the value auto for left and right. When using auto, the browser takes the width of the element away from its parent element, which in this case happens to be the browser window, and it divides that number by 2 and puts that value to both the left and right hand sides centering the element. So for example, if your browser window was set at 1000 pixels and the element to be centered aligned was 800 pixels wide, then 1000 minus 800 gives you 200 pixels left. We divide that number by 2, and that gives a margin of 100 pixels on the left and 100 pixels on the right hand side. Now what's really great about this trick is that it auto updates. So each time the browser width changes, the margins are dynamically recalculated and updated. So the element always stays centered. Okay, so let's save this and see what happens. So here we are with the base page before we update it. And it's just worth pointing out that if we press F12 on our browser to open up the developer's tools, we can move our mouse around and look at the specs of each part. So here we can see in the navigation bar, for example, it's very obvious it's on the left-hand side, but we can also see the orangey color, the mustard color on the right-hand side, which is kind of like its margin. And the same will apply to the footer. So we now update the page, and sometimes you need to press Ctrl and F5 to force the update. And we can see it's been updated. But you may notice it's not quite perfectly centered. So let's have a look at what's going on. Well, we can come up here and we can check the wrapper. And we can see that the wrapper is dead center. However, when we go inside, we notice that the nav bar is still left aligned, but now within the wrapper itself. And the same goes for the footer. Luckily, we can apply the same formatting technique to the navigation bars as we did to the wrapper. So let's go and do that. So here we are in the nav rule, and as you can see, I've added position relative and margin 1 rem auto. So this time we're adding essentially a 10 pixel top and bottom margin and then the auto there. So again, we save this and we go and see what it looks like in the browser. So again, back into the browser, we're just going to refresh this and we can see it moves in a bit. So we can just again go over, see that wrapper is there, and we'll come down to nav. And again, you can see it is perfectly centered aligned now, as is the footer nav. Now, I know it looks like we don't have to round the corners anymore, but trust me, they are there. It's just the way it shows up in the system. So there you have it, a perfectly rounded page. What more could you ask for? As you can see, the footer changes as well, because don't forget that also has the nav rule being applied to it as well. So what happens if you already have a finished page and you need to update it? Well, it'll work out just the same. And again, let me prove it. So here we are with the finished web page, or the nearly finished web page. And as you can see, it's left aligned. Now, it really does make these indents look a bit weird when we've got this big free space on the right-hand side. And it just doesn't look nice, especially at the 4K resolution. If we zoom in a bit, even like this, when it's much bigger, we can still see it just doesn't look very nice. Let's just take this back down and, well, let's go in and change it. So we go first of all into the index, and we're going to zoom up to the top, and we're going to add in the wrapper. So that's going to be dot wrapper in Emmet. We're going to cut the closing div out. We're going to scroll down to the bottom here, and we're going to add it just before the closing tag, and then we're going to save that. And then inside base CSS, now you can already see here that I've already got the nav bar position and commented. So I'm just going to uncomment that. And then we're going to add the wrapper rule that we need. And again, so it's going to be position relative. We're going to give it a max width of 150 rem, which is 1,500. And we are also going to do the margin, which is the magic. So margin, and we're going to give it 0 auto, like we've done before. We're going to save that. We're going to go back to the page, and then in 3, 2, 1, boom, there you go. That's how you do it. Doesn't that look lovely? A perfectly centered page with centered elements. What more could you ask for? This means we have reached the end of this video. My job here is done. We have learned how to center a web page that was created using absolute and relative positioning. If you want to see how it's done in a grid-based system, well, you're in luck. That video is en route, so please subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss it when it comes out. Thank you for staying with me all the way. If there's a video you want me to do, please let me know. If you want a shout out in one of the future videos or want to ask anything, please just whack it in the comments below, as I do read every comment. See you guys next time. I am Zen, signing off.